Hello, this is a continuation of my Game of Thrones review, and I want to talk about how power can change in a game and some of the suggestions they give. For characters that rise in power, GMs can give their titles for free with the bonus influence, wealth, etc., and you don't make your players pay for it. Another option is the character actually pays for them with feats after the fact, kind of like they owe you whatever feats are necessary to become the head of the household or the ruling person, etc. So it happens in game, and then the next like 3 or 4 feats are kind of already paid for. It's kind of like feat credit, I guess. Third option is the character pays for them ahead of time before he gets the benefits. And depending on what the GM wants to do, those are some options. And again, ECL should not change because of what happens in the campaign and play. It's only a character creation. Other shifts in power, perhaps gaining new titles and losing old ones, and social status can change because of that. Examples are Maesters, the Night Watch, and the Kingsguard, etc. You basically gain a new social status and influence, but you lose some of the old ones. You never lose personal NPCs, influence, and that is retained. Your wealth will probably be lower, and you may take the in-service defect to represent this. Total loss of power. You lose your social status, you lose your base influence and wealth. You may lose personal NPC influence, depending on what your, how badly, how nefarious you were, or what you got caught for. Any influence that you do lose comes back to you, though. So you can spend that on other NPCs, other groups, as your story for your character changes. The GM should consider other benefits to try to balance the game, such as extra XP, items. Jon Snow's sword is an example, where he goes to the Night Watch and he gets, the Beryllian. I think I can't think of the word right now, but he basically gets a very good sword when he becomes steward. The GM may assign defects and give out bonus points with those. Talks about influence in marriage, how women usually gain influence by marriage and not usually the men, unless the man, the husband, gets a right to rule over certain lands that he got from the marriage. Game balance in highly political games, it warns, is a little bit tougher than doing a standard dungeon crawl, so you have to watch out for that. And if an influence NPC dies, those points are returned to the character, so that they're not wasted. Chapter 10 is defects, and again, these grant bonus points. And some defects can only be taken in character creation, like if you're born deformed, like Tyrion. You can get rid of these by role-playing against them, or by spending future skill points and future feats. And so instead of getting a feat or putting skill points in skills, you just buy off your defects, if that's possible. Again, it would depend on the defect. And the defect names on page 198, they're just great role-playing aids, in my opinion. I always like to play characters that have some big flaw or other. And you can acquire defects during the game, depending on how you roleplay your character. Chapter 11 is equipment. And again, wealth is by social status. Wealth rank 2 or above, you pretty much get any item, with the GM approval, of course. Below 2 ranks is kind of like traditional D&D, where you roll for your starting money. Coins are generally not used in the setting. There's more bartering. Only the really very wealthy use coins in big cities. Highborn and lowborn with wealth are treated differently. There's optional rules for fluctuating wealth depending on the crops and business and location, etc. And I think I got this right. A silver stag is worth 56 pennies. A dragon is worth 210 stags, and a stag equals 7 stars. So it's not like, like traditional D&D where it's all easy to do math. It's a little bit tricky. Again, the small folk, or the peasants, barter. Values of items can fluctuate. Coins can be clipped or reduced in value by making them thinner. Dwarfs, giants, and children are the only exception to all characters are medium size. Again, Game of Thrones is less tactical than D&D 3.5 with the removal of attack of opportunities, but I like that. When I was reading through the weapon descriptions, I think Tetsugu would like that section of the book, since he's such a big weapons kind of buff, I guess. Armor is damage reduction, like I said, and there are armor parts by name to give a little bit of extra fluff. I like the flavor they give. Shields are a little bit different. Most of the time they add to AC, but sometimes they're only damage reduction, depending on what the attacker is aiming for. Like if he is trying to get around your shield, it's armor class. If he wants to destroy your shield, it becomes damage reduction. Valyrian, that's the word. Swords, the art of making them has been forgotten. They're lighter. They get +3 to attack, and armor only does half damage reduction against them. And there's a big long list of evil setting-specific poisons. Okay. Chapter 12 is game mechanics. The game uses degree of success. So, just because you get above it, it's just that you do succeed, but if you get way above it, that matters. If you fail horribly, that matters as well. And the game uses dynamic armor class, which is an idea that I've thought about in the past, where instead of just having a 10 plus all your modifiers, you have a D20 roll plus all your modifiers. So when someone attacks you, you have to roll as well. So it kind of gives that feeling of you're fighting them, right, in my opinion. It does mean that there's more dice rolls, though. And as an optional rule, you can ignore that. The movement's a little bit streamlined. They simplified missile ranges. Combat is deadlier because of shock value and bleeding. 20 and 1 aren't auto hits and misses. There's no mass combat rules, but again, if you can find Birthright, there's a pretty good mass combat system in there. Defense bonuses are by class. Shock value is a half your con, and if damage that you take is equal to or greater than shock value, you have to do a fort save. The DC is 12 plus 1 per point above your shock value. So if someone really wallops you, you can be in a world of hurt. If you fail, you're incapacitated. So it doesn't matter if you have a lot of hit points. It could be bad for you. Threats from critical hits must still hit the AC. There's no automatic hit. If the confirmation roll beats the dynamic AC, that's like the person you're trying to hit roll a d20 as well. And then you crit. For I don't know how to pronounce it. Coup de graces or coup de grace? Coup de grace, that's right. It's basically instant death. There's none of that trying to damage someone thing. You basically kill them. Ranged weapons, you can't take a 5-foot step back, do a Legolas and shoot. Especially when you're in melee combat, that doesn't work. There are called shots, and there are some additional options for grappling, such as biting. There's a -2 cumulative AC penalty for additional attacks against you in the same round. So you're easier to hit. Shields in the game give a bigger armor class bonus. There's an optional simplified critical rule idea. Basically, if you roll a natural 20, you do 2 times damage, and it doesn't matter what their defense is. So you automatically hit. Again, I really like there's optional rules throughout this game. Shock value is also the same value as serious injury. And this is the bleeding rules. If you're not treated, you eventually bleed to death. For shock value, you're incapacitated for a number of rounds equal to the amount you failed your fort save by. There's an optional rule of fort save every round to recover. Serious injury, you basically bleed 1 per round. It's 1 per hour with a heal check with the specialization physic. And there's a heal surgery rule to stop the bleeding. I was a little kind of fuzzy on what that actually means. I guess you just have to have someone with the physics specialization and surgery specialization. I don't know. I think this is an area where I would just house rule it to make it a little less deadly, I think. So, for example, a dying character with negative hit points is still bleeding 1 per round if no one's healed him. So you die a lot faster. There's optional rules for grievous injuries, such as broken bones. The hit point recovery is your con modifier per day, and that's doubled with a healing roll, a healing check, a successful one. There's optional quicker healing, that's basically your character level. There's tournament rules with blunted weapons. And I really like the rules light version for the reputation and influence points. And that's on page 261. So let's see if I can find that here. Because, as most of you know, I'm more of a rules light guy. Of course, many players and GMs may simply wish to roleplay these political engagements out, ignoring the mechanics and dice rules completely. No set of mechanics can perfectly capture the intricacies and realpolitik of a place like Westeros or the Free Cities. These rules provide a basic framework to give players a reference point. They are encouraged to use, modify, or disregard these rules as they see fit. For groups leaning towards a more rules-light game, we suggest using reputation and influence scores as a benchmark or common metric in order to judge characters' rankings in the world, rather than as a hard and detailed mechanic. I think if I would run this game, I would definitely do the more rules-light version, and I might even try to, I don't know, run it with a different game. Like I think you could run a Game of Thrones game with swords and wizardry, Labyrinth Lord, without the demi-humans, of course. But that would take a little bit of work, too. But again, I'm more of a rules-light guy, so I'll get off that soapbox. You can stack reputations. It's basically like your main reputation plus a half of another reputation if it counts. And again, you kind of have to balance out reputations if you have negative ones and positive ones. Influence checks. You can add half of your reputation bonus to that. And influences basically describe, where your loyalties lie. And there's some bullet points on 264 that kind of go into how things work a little bit and what influence does. But I already read those, basically what influence can do. Again, the book kind of repeats things a little bit. So I think I'm going to stop right there, and I'll see you in the next video.